I wanted to make a quick video to talk about full stack engineers and what exactly is a full stack engineer and should you try to become one. Now, the reason I put full stack in quotes is because I think this term is very generic. There's not like a strict definition of what a full stack engineer knows. All I can say is from my definition, it's someone who isn't afraid to go and learn new things and dive into various parts of the code base in your system, whether that's front end, back end, CI/CD. Let's say you're using GitHub Actions, they can configure those workflows. Let's say that you're using infrastructure as code like Terraform. You're not afraid to dive into that and understand it. From my perspective, that is what full stack means. And some of the definitions I've heard online is a jack of all trades, master of none. You could say this has negative connotation. Maybe it has positive connotation. Maybe it's neutral. From my perspective, having someone on your team or your project is beneficial when they can jump around from task to task and have no issue trying to solve it. Will they be the best at solving this? Will they implement it the most optimal way, the most performant way? Probably not. And that's when you might need to reach out and find someone who specializes in database or specializes in security. They will have a much greater depth of knowledge in that task. By the way, I would consider myself a full stack engineer. If you guys watch me, I kind of jump around from every single different topic because I just enjoy learning new stuff. So let's talk about what you need to understand to become a web developer and to actually ship a product to production that your users are going to use. Obviously, you need front end. So this would involve like React, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Maybe you can throw in Tailwind or Next.js. Everything that's related to the front end probably be coupled to this. Maybe you want to put accessibility in here, although I would probably say accessibility is its own special little skill set you should probably learn. I'm also going to say skills needed to ship products. Okay, so we got front end, we got accessibility. Let's also put UI, UX, because if you don't know how to actually build a nice looking application, no one's going to use your application. You might solve a really cool problem, but you need it to look nice as well. And honestly, some of this stuff could be bucketed together inside a front end, but I think pulling some of this stuff out, like you can find a really good React developer who cannot design anything for his life. So let's keep going. We have accessibility, we have backend, we got database, we got security, we have testing. Let's just go ahead and add DevOps as well, because I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you end up doing that are related to DevOps. So these are some of the skills that you're going to need to ship a product, right? You need to be able to build a UI. You need that UI to connect to a backend. That backend needs to connect to a database. You need to make sure everything is secure. You need to make sure you have your stuff automated with testing, end-to-end tests, integration tests. You need to make sure you have some type of infrastructure as code set up to deploy all your stuff that you and your team are working on. And then of course, you need to make sure it looks good with UI and UX, design, and you need to make sure it's accessible, especially if you have a lot of users who might be vision impaired. I'm going to move accessibility over here, but I think accessibility is something important as well. All right, so here are some of the skills. Now, I would say there's probably a lot more boxes you can add in, like a site reliability engineer. They probably have to know more about scaling. So like you need to know about scale, but we're going to just keep this simple for right now. So when it comes to a full stack engineer, you should know a little bit about everything. Like you should know a little bit about DevOps. You should probably understand how to use the AWS console. You should know how to test your code. You should know how to make sure stuff is secure. You should know how to set up a database and configure it, whether that's using like AWS RDS or some type of like Neon database. You should know how to build backend endpoints. You should know how to build a front end. Like you should have used enough SaaS applications to have a good feel about what a good design application feels like versus how a badly designed application would kind of function. So I guess my perspective of a full stack engineer is that everything that you might need to know to ship a product from scratch, like writing it from the ground up, you should be able to do it by yourself. It might take you a while. You might not write the most performant code. It might take you a little bit longer when you're dealing with tasks related to database, but for a new startup or a small project that you don't have a ton of users off the bat, knowing enough to be able to ship a fully production ready application is what I would consider a full stack engineer. Now, if you don't feel like you can do this, maybe you're more of like a specialist. So the difference between a full stack and a specialist is that a specialist might not care about front end. So they don't actually do anything on the front end. I'm going to add this line here. This is your width of skills. I think it's also called breadth of skills, breadth of knowledge, or you can call it skills. And this is your depth. Okay. So again, we're talking about a specialist now. So we're going to go ahead and just like move this up. Let's say we're doing a specialist. Now for some projects and teams, if the project is larger in scale and it's already been in production for 5 or 10 years and you have millions of users, let's say you have hundreds of requests per second, you may have different needs for the project, right? You have a decently working UI and backend, but now you might need to hire people who can come in and make stuff more performant, try to save some operational costs. So let's say you want to hire someone who is a specialist in DevOps and cloud engineering. This is someone who might have a ton of knowledge with Google Cloud Platform or AWS, with infrastructure as code, CI/CD pipelines, but their job is to come in and look at how you're currently running your application and try to figure out ways to get this all deployed out. Maybe they can save costs by using Lambdas, or they can save costs by using like some type of managed AWS service. Maybe they can save costs by spinning up a Kubernetes cluster on bare metal machines and managing all that. Okay, so again, a specialist has a ton of knowledge in one special silo. And this is very valuable to companies as well, especially when they're more mature and they need to come through and hire people who can improve stuff. Okay, let's look at one more example of a specialist. Let's say you have a database and you're working on like an insurance company. Many of these databases have been around for like 10 or 20 years. And so they have like hundreds of tables and they have like tons of constraints between these tables in their Postgres database or MySQL database or Microsoft SQL database. And then they might have tons of stored procedures. And the code is huge. They have a ton of stuff that needs to be fixed and maintained. And so they might need to hire someone like a database engineer who can come through here, make sure that it is scaled properly. It's, they set it up to have read replicas. They know how to make sure that we can handle all the traffic from all the various microservices that may be trying to hit this database. And of course, they're going to have expertise in backend. Like, you're not going to be able to become a database engineer without knowing a little bit about backend, a little bit about security. But the point is that the specialist might not care about front end at all. They might have never touched HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and that's fine. Their goal is to scale up the backend of a system that's getting a ton of users. All right, we just learned about what a full stack engineer is. We learned about what a specialist is. Let's pivot back to full stack and just kind of talk a little bit about this. When would a company want to hire a full stack engineer? From my perspective, if you have a smaller project and you don't have as much money, you probably can't afford a database engineer because they're going to cost a lot of money. They're probably high in demand and they're very, very low in supply. And so if you look at basic economics, if it's high demand, low supply, they're going to be very expensive. So hiring someone who's very, very good at configuring databases and making sure that they scale is probably going to cost a little bit more than a full stack engineer who knows how to jump between these various skill sets. Okay, so if your project doesn't have an extreme amount of capital, maybe you want to hire a full stack engineer who can at least get the job done. You can throw any task at them and they can implement it. Another reason a full stack engineer is good is because they can fill in the gaps when people leave, right? For example, if people go on vacation for 2 weeks or a month, because you have full stack engineers on your team, they don't have a problem picking up the slack or the void of work when people go on vacation or people quit. Right? People leaving companies is a legit risk that you have to kind of keep in mind on your software engineering project and team. So you definitely want to have some people to be able to fill in the gaps when people leave. For example, let's say your team has a couple of front-end specialists and a couple of back-end specialists, and you have maybe 2 or 3 full stack engineers who like to come in here and just kind of bounce between the front end and the back end and try to play a support character. From my perspective, a full stack engineer is kind of like the medic in TF2. I don't know if you played TF2. I might be getting too nerdy right now, but in TF2, the medic is a support role, right? Their role is to go around and heal other players. From my perspective, that's kind of what a full stack engineer is. They're able to go into various places in your code base and give support to whoever might need it, just implement features and fix bugs wherever they may need to do that. But the main issue with the full stack engineers, they don't have that depth of knowledge. So there's going to be some times where they're going to get a task and they just legit can't solve it. It's going to take them a lot longer. Now, eventually they will solve it. And as they're trying to solve it, they're going to kind of like expand their depth of knowledge in this topic, but it's going to take them longer because they haven't invested all this time to become very, very good at security or databases. So when you throw them a task that's related to updating some Terraform code, they may not be fully up to speed with it, but they can eventually learn it, right? I don't think any engineer in this industry can't learn something. I think if you like to box yourself into a particular category, you're doing yourself and your team a disservice. I think you should be willing and eager to help out where help is needed, especially if you don't feel like there's a lot of tasks coming in that are related to your specialty. Okay, so I think full stack engineers are probably more valuable at a smaller company, a startup, or like a 2-man team. Like, you got to end up doing everything. And for me, I like doing that. I like learning a lot about everything. I don't really have the patience. Maybe it's like ADHD or something, but I can't just stick to one topic and just learn it to like the depths of an expert. Like, I just have a problem like sticking to one thing and just really, really diving in deep and learning to it. I get kind of burned out quickly and bored. And for me, I like being a full stack engineer. Granted, it might not pay as much as becoming a specialist, but I think working at a smaller company where you wear multiple hats, you jump around from skill to skill, trying to help out where you can, I feel rewarded doing that because I feel like I'm making an impact on the project. Now, again, the difference between a full stack and a specialist is you are hired to do one thing and do it well. So who is trying to hire someone who can do one thing and do it well? These are probably companies that have been around for a while. For example, Google. They're probably going to look for someone who's really good at databases and backend to try to make sure that the systems they're building can handle the scale that is needed to handle the millions of users that Google has. And so you're going to get hired, you're going to be doing backend, and that is your full-time job. You're going to be doing databases, and that is your full-time job. Every day you wake up 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week or more, and that's what you do. And some people love that. I mean, it pays really well. There's probably tons of stuff when it comes to databases that'll keep you entertained and you'd have fun just learning everything you can about databases. But for me, I just don't want to spend a bunch of time in the weeds and the technical side of things. So when it comes to specialists, a lot of people probably like doing this. And I would say also getting into consulting is probably a great way. If you want to become a database expert, you could probably do some freelancing or consulting and make a decent amount of money. I know there's a lot of consultants who charge like, $150 to $200 an hour, right? You can make a lot of money being a consultant, but it also requires that you know a lot about this topic so that you can jump from team and project and company, work with them for a couple of months, help guide their team on a path to success, and then you bounce and try to work on another company. But honestly, to get to this level of skill and value, it's probably going to take you a long time. And this is probably going to be reserved for people who've been in the industry for like 10, 20, 30 years, right? That kind of wraps up the overview of a full stack versus a specialist. Now, I guess my question to you all, if you're still watching, is do you think a full stack engineer is as valuable as a specialist? Do you think a specialist is more valuable? Or do you think every team should have a nice mixture of the two? I would say that from the projects I worked on, every developer has a certain set of skills. And so I wouldn't say that like there's always going to be a specialist. There are people on your team who are really good at accessibility. Like he's a go-to person. And so you want to go and you ask them questions about accessibility. There's people who are really good at the database on your team. So you probably go to them and ask questions. But you can actually have a whole team of full stack engineers as long as you have different engineers on the team who decide to specialize a little bit in various topics and kind of like maybe not specialize as much in other areas. But I would say this is common. Even if you're a full stack engineer, I think there's one or two topics that you probably enjoy more than others. And so by default, you're going to become kind of like the team expert in this area. And if you have enough people on a team, what ends up happening is you're going to have this skill set overlap where, okay, although one person's not really good at databases, they're going to be really good at front end. Okay, and so like if you can at least make sure that your team has enough overlap with these things so that eventually you have enough of these really deep bars of knowledge and expertise, I think your team is going to become very, very performant and be able to get a lot of work done. All right, I've been rambling for a while now, so let me know if you guys like this video or if there's anything you want me to expand upon in a future video. Have a good day and happy coding.